Evening, ladies and gentlemen. How lovely to see so many of you here. My name's Kate Mosse. I'm a novelist and a playwright and the biographer of CFT, as you know, and it's my great good fortune to do the pre-show talks here. It's my great pleasure to welcome Holly, Race Roughan, here.
It's the first time my name has ever been got right, ever.
Darling, I asked before. I'm old in the tooth. I know it's always worth asking, because obviously you can imagine my name is pronounced wrong a lot of the time, which is fantastic. And just so for those of you who, as Holly says, it's her debut here. So she is the Associate Artistic Director of Headlong and the Assistant Director of Theatre in Prison project called Cathedral, has got amazing directing credits, and I would like you to buy the programme so you can see them all. But they include many theatres, not least of all Wilton, Southwark Playhouse, the Royal Exchange in Manchester, and has been an artistic or associate director on many extraordinary productions, not least of all People, Places and Things at the national and then on the UK tour. She is the director of this brand new play. This is a world premiere, and the writer Cordelia, Lynn, is a recipient of the Harold Pinter Commission in 2017 and a Colony Fellow in 2018. But it's such an honour and a pleasure to be talking to somebody who's doing a new play. So there's a wonderful interview with you and Cordelia in the programme where you talk about the idea for the project and, the call in the middle of the night. But for people who haven't yet read the programme, can you just say a little bit about how this project started and how much it owes to the original Ibsen Hedda Gabler and how much is you and Cordelia cooking it up between you?
Yeah, of course. So Cordelia and I both did English literature at university together in Bristol, and I started directing her plays there, and we worked together above a pub about 10 years ago on a play that sort of launched both of us into the industry. We were reminiscing about it yesterday, at that sort of stage where you're kind of doing everything. So we were both painting the set together, and Cordelia was running around trying to find props just before press night. So we're good friends and collaborators. And we got talking about this play at some point, and I guess a couple of things. One, I just did it at school, and it was always a kind of play that stayed with me. It's a complicated play. It kind of feels like a problem play in a way. And she's always loved it. And I think the thing that we found really difficult is when you stick it in a modern setting, it's quite frustrating, because as an audience member, you just think with the central character, oh, for God's sake, why don't you divorce your husband and get a job? And we were sort of saying, how do we make this work now? And Cordelia then kind of phoned me or emailed me, I can't remember what now, in the middle of a night and said, so we'd had this long conversation about it, and she said, I've got it. We need to make all the characters our parents' age. And I was like, oh. And the thinking behind it was that this isn't in the original, it's a woman who's just got married. She's 29, which is mine and Cordelia's age. And she's sort of looking ahead into her life and feeling like she's got nothing to look forward to. And Cordelia's idea was, what happens if this woman's in her early 60s and she's looking back at her life and feeling like she didn't achieve what she wanted to achieve? And then she's looking ahead at her life and feeling like she's got nothing to look forward to. And that kind of, just as her husband's academic career is really taking off, she feels like she's stranded in the middle of nowhere, having not had the career she wanted, having a daughter who she kind of, on some level, has got a very complicated relationship with and sort of perhaps didn't want. And that's where the idea was born. And then we spent 2 years together working on the play, and Cordelia's really interested when she does adaptation in being in a relationship with the original. So it's not a kind of blow the whole thing apart, make it into a sort of 5 women series of monologues thing. It's actually very truthful to the original structure of Hedda Gabler, but it's all set 2019, and we've brought it kind of in within a family setting. That was a very long answer.
It's a brilliant answer, because that's what people want to know. And although I have to say it's rather dispiriting, I do have a daughter of exactly your age, and the idea that your career is over at this stage. I'd just like to say, ladies and gentlemen, my books are still available in the shops. I mean, that play, you know, the original play, 1891, so and very powerful. Hedda Gabler is often talked about being as a proto-feminist, you know, someone who's trying to think for herself. So when you decided it was going to be set now, that you weren't going to, say, put her in the 50s or, you know, that sort of time, did you have a sense of the way you were going to, together, change things from the original or honour them or take them out altogether? Because there are so many characters, whether it's Bertha the maid, whether it's deciding that she has a daughter rather than Thea being somebody different. Did you know those things at the beginning, or was it when you started to work on the play you would stress test things, go, do we need a maid in this day and age? How are we going to make the maid work? Just talk us a little bit about how you kept going back and forward from the original.
How do we go? Cordelia sort of had all of the idea, honestly, overnight in one night. And then it was a kind of case of honing it and getting really into the psychology of it. So Thea, in the original, Thea is the same age as Hedda and is her kind of best friend. And in our version, Thea is 30 years younger and her daughter. And that felt... I don't want to give it away. Do people know how to go up? No, I won't give it away.
Don't give it away. But
fine. That felt that it worked for reasons.
That you will discover in the moment.
And then we talked a lot about, the maid in the original has kind of barely any lines. And the really obvious thing to do is to cut the maid. And we talked a lot about that. And then we decided that actually it was really, so we did do it, there's been kind of various drafts. But it felt really important that Bertha, the maid, is in our play, because it felt like actually Hedda is not an every woman. She's an upper class, she's a very upper class woman of a certain kind of era and a certain age. And that it felt really important to have the kind of working class character constantly juxtaposed throughout the production, which is the problems Hedda has are problems, and they are real problems, but they're not the same problems as Bertha has. So Bertha sort of works to kind of gently bring that class angle and keep that class angle alive, if you like, in the play. And actually, in answer to your proto-feminist thing, I think what's really interesting about it is we think of Hedda Gabler as sort of revolutionary, but her whole sort of Achilles heel, if you like, is she's deeply conservative as a character, and she doesn't have the courage to act, and the whole play is about her not having the courage to act. And actually it's Thea, in both the original and in our version, who's the sort of new woman who does have the courage to... She does have the courage to act, and so much of the friction between them is the fact that kind of Hedda has chosen a traditional path. She's chosen to not pursue a career. She's chosen these things to be the wife. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like, is it feminist? It's sort of feminist, but also she's very conservative.
But I think what you and Cordelia have done, which is so clever with the maid character and those contrasts, is exactly that sort of feminism, which is Hedda is making a choice to not work and is frustrated by the choices she's made. And Bertha hasn't got a choice.
Yes,
she's got
exactly.
2 children, and she's not sitting around going, should I work or not? Do I want to be a stay-at-home mum? So I thought that subtlety of it would be quite easy to have kind of gone further with sort of banging the audience over the head. But I don't know whether you ever did dial those things back, but it seems so natural within the context of the family and the
Good,
play.
I'm glad it seems natural.
Good.
That's good.
Well,
we'll take that. We'll take that.
So when you finally had a working script, there is, I mean, long overdue, the incredible Hayden Gwynne making her Chichester debut. And she is, I think, absolutely brilliant. From the moment she comes on, you know, just looks amazing and is amazing, and you don't like her and you feel sorry for her and you love her, all those things. Can you just talk a little bit about how you went about your casting? Because there's also fantastic support all the way around, and it's lovely to have people like Jonathan Hyde and Anthony Koff back here, and wonderful support. But was it then, okay, who is our Hedda? Is that where you start in a play like this, where she's
Yeah, because I think for me, and definitely for Cordelia, both the original and more so in Cordelia's version, it's a deeply funny play. And I think that's, you know how we always talk about sort of tragedy and comedy being 2 sides of the same coin. it feels so important that part of the heartbreak of this play is that it's also really funny. So that when we were working with the casting director, Hayden Gwynn came to the top of the list very quickly, because it sort of went, who's got the acting chops to break the heart, but also can do comedy like that? And that's Hayden. And I think that's why it's been very electric working with her on this, is that you get all that for free. You get charisma for free with Hayden. And then we've worked really hard together to put together the psychology of the play. So yeah.
Yes, because, you know, I mean, there are so many different ways of doing it, but there are very few actresses that can simply say, oh, God, and everybody falls about, you know, at that moment. And also, you can hear a pin drop,
yes.
you know, in different moments. So when you're working with a new play, I know you and Cordelia, you've said how you met and you've worked together, so you know each other and you have each other's voices in your heads. But the moment you move from the page into the rehearsal room and then the rehearsal room into the theatre, things change.
Yes.
So how much do you keep working on a new play? Is it tomorrow night press night where you press print? You know, just talk us a little bit about how...
press like,
Yes. No, it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic.
It is exciting.
But, you know, so often when I'm talking to directors and writers, and many of these wonderful supporters of CFT will have heard people talk about new plays. Some feel that once you're in the rehearsal room, that's it. And others just keep changing, even taking scenes out, changing orders right up until the wire. So how do you work, and how much is the preview process work in progress for you?
So I work only on new plays, and this is kind of interesting for me because it's a new play, but it's also a classic, and that's been a different process for me, mostly in terms of the preparation I've done. And it really, really just depends who the writer is. So some writers almost bring like a working draft to rehearsals, and the whole thing remains really fluid throughout the process, and the actors go mad, going, just nail it, tell us what we're doing. And some writers, and Cordelia is one of these writers, gets it to kind of exactly where she wants it, and then it enters rehearsal. So even though we have changed things in this draft, we definitely haven't changed it as much as I have experienced with other writers before. But the major change we made, and we did this maybe 2.5 weeks into rehearsal, maybe 3 weeks into rehearsal. And by this time, I'd spent about half a day rehearsing this scene, is we took out the opening scene. So that is because Cordelia had written a new opening. So everything follows beat by beat the original story of Hedda Gabler apart from this new opening. And it was brilliant, and it was really funny, and we were all attached to it because it sort of sets up this very, very modern world, and kind of it sort of gestures to an audience who maybe know Hedda Gabler very well. This is not what you think, you know, you're not in for the ride that you think you're in for. This is different. And then the more we thought about it, the more Cordelia thought about it, she was like, something deep inside me is saying, don't mess with Ibsen's structure. And there's a reason that you don't meet Hedda until 3 scenes in, that they're kind of like, you know, that kind of classic setup of a character being talked about and then finally they arrive. So we took that out, and we were going to take it right to the wire and try it in a preview. And then in the end, we just thought, no, let's just go for it. And then previews are absolutely a working time for me. And it's because you sort of, especially with a new play, I think it's different. Like if you're doing King Lear, you know King Lear works, like we know King Lear works. And if it's not working, then you're seriously, you know, I mean, it's hard. I'm not touching it with a barge pole, but you're kind of, you know, we know it works. Whereas with a new play, you don't really know it works until you get an audience in. And I think we'd slightly forgotten our play was very funny, and we got an audience in and everyone was chuckling away, and it was like, oh yeah, of course. But
that's the weirdest thing always about Ibsen and Chekhov, that they thought they were funny plays. And
yes.
The heartbreak came, it snuck up on you. They weren't supposed to be, you know, deep and broodingly.
Totally. Yes. She says in a completely grey set. Yeah. But you guys come, and then suddenly it's very, very clear like what needs to happen and what needs to change. And we've taken 2 moments out. We took a moment out today, which we're going to try tonight. We took a moment out a couple of days ago, but kind of like little things, but they've been taken out. And then a lot of it's dramaturgical work in terms of clarity of storytelling. So there was a scene that I genuinely hadn't directed until yesterday. And the actors had done an amazing job at self-directing. It was the last scene of the first half, but I sort of let it go because I couldn't work out whether it needed to be quite an Ibsenian moment or whether it needed to be a very modern moment, and I kept just trying to work that out from an audience, trying to like sit with it, and then yesterday or the day before I was like, aha, it's got to be modern. And
can we just go a little bit further on that? What you mean by whether it's got to be an Ibsen moment, so a sort of late 19th century or a modern moment. So what do you actually mean by that within the context of a play that is set now, a long time? So just
I guess I mean that on some level, Hedda Gabler is a melodrama, a kind of albeit very funny one. And it's sort of rise of naturalism and all that stuff, but it's kind of melodramatic. And there are some moments that if you don't lean into the melodrama of the production, it doesn't come alive.
You've got to kind of give into it, you mean?
You've got to give into it. And then there are other moments that you want to play against the grain of it, otherwise it just feels like we don't buy that in 2019. So there's sort of crucial moments in the play where I've been kind of playing a bit of a chess game, which goes, if I modernise that, if I take a kind of psychologically realistic route through that scene, is that going to land with the audience? Oh, actually, no, hang on a minute, that just doesn't wash, and I've got to go hell for leather. You know, we're in a theatre, and this is a cathartic, dramatic moment. So it's all that sort of calibration of pulling the levers of your play up and down. And the only way to really work that out is to sort of have people in every night and kind of test it out and see when people are really engaging and seeing when people are sort of slightly not understanding what you're doing. So I guess a lot of my work this week has been clarity of storytelling. Just going, is the story clear, and is the sort of rhythm of the emotional journey for you guys clear, basically, or engaging?
And one of those things about the sort of the modern versus the honouring the original sort of tensions of the play, even if people here have not ever read or seen Hedda Gabler, most people will have a sense of what Ibsen and Chekhov tend to do. And there is an issue, obviously, around weapons. Now, you have stuck with the original of that.
I wanted a bow and arrow. Hayden wanted a bow and arrow.
A bow and arrow, excellent. Oh, I see, we're going back to medieval times. I'm in. But something like that, that's quite a big ask, isn't it, of a modern audience? You know, so you have modern things, mobile phones and all the rest of it, but you've also kept some of that older way that the story is going to unfold. How hard was that? Because, of course, how do we explain things that would have been quite commonplace in a home in 1891, but they're not in a modern home? So do you just want to talk a little bit about that, how you made those work? Because I think you've done it really, really well, but I thought, wow, that must have been a lot of talk about.
So that was definitely a Cordelia solve, just worked out, okay, we need guns in this play. How do we make that truthful?
I avoided saying it, ladies, because I said to the director that she could say what she liked.
We need guns in this play, and how do we make that realistic in 2019? And she solved that in a way that you will see tonight. I think from a directing point of view, they become even more charged objects, because unless we were setting this in America, I've never seen a gun. So, do you know what I mean? People don't have guns. And then for me, that charges, it becomes even more outrageous and exciting and kind of electric that Hedda owns guns. I guess I just lent into it. I was just like, cool, this is even naughtier now than it would have been.
Interesting, as you say, you know, me, the next generation, I'm that generation. And that was the first gun that I saw, was my father's, for that exact same reason. So, I thought it was very interesting. So there are other things in the play that are very beautiful and atmospheric. You have live music, and there's also a very sophisticated soundscape and lightscape. So when you and Cordelia had your raw material, at what point did you bring in the design, the lighting design, the sound design, and that sort of eeriness of...
When did you see it?
I saw it on Monday.
On Monday, okay. So, loads has changed technically. This is a play, and I knew this the moment I read the first draft, which was something like 200 pages long and 4 hours long, and it's now 2 hours. We've literally lost about 50% of it. It's extraordinary. That instinctively, I thought, this is going to shrug off anything I try and put on it. It's got a sort of... Cordelia trained as a classical pianist before she started writing, and she writes very musically and very rhythmically. So there's a kind of battle between the text and anything you put on it, which is like, no, I do not need underscoring. I am the underscore. So when we first and there's stage directions almost every 3 paragraphs that say the house, and the idea is that it's the house making itself known in the play. And I think kind of how that's working in a more meta way is it's almost Ibsen making himself known through Cordelia's new play to
it's a
us.
Character itself.
It's a character. It's a character. So what often happens when you have a play that you know is going to shrug off any kind of really abstract design or any sort of like funky lighting is, as a director, you think, oh, I saw the house and I was like, that's where I'll have my fun. So in tech, we came up with like a load of really sort of haunted house. Like, it got to the point where I'd almost made a slasher film. And then I spent the next 6 days taking it all out. So depending on which preview you came to, you're either going, tonight you will see something that's actually very beautifully lit and actually quite simple in a way. Whereas if you came to, I think we opened on Friday night, it was honestly like a slasher film. It was great, but
Proper
it was
gothic.
gothic, but it was kind of amazing. But the play was just going, I don't need this. I'm doing this for you. Get off me, get off me. And then The Pianist is that, for me, there was something about Hedda's wasted potential, and that she was a pianist and she was an academic, and she got pregnant and she didn't pursue those things. So I, quite early doors, had this idea about having a live pianist in a kind of that sort of haunts the play, and also kind of haunts Hedda as the sort of path she hasn't taken and her wasted potential. And that's how we end up with A Pianist.
Yeah. And there is, which we won't spoil, but a very magical moment around the piano and Hedda herself in Act 2, which was such a relief, because it's so terrible when people pretend. And you could see somebody else behind, doing that. So it's fantastic. Well, it's I've got to bring it to a close, I'm afraid, because for the wonderful reason that they have a gun call, which apparently has to happen, for a show where there are guns rather than bows and arrows. For now, have a wonderful press night tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful run here in the beautiful Minerva, and then we wish you every luck when you transfer to the Lowry in Salford. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Race Roughan.